This episode of the Newbery Report is sponsored by Payfully. Renting your home or spare room can be a great way to earn some extra income, but actually getting paid can take months. That's where Payfully comes in. Payfully is a safe and secure way to get paid for your upcoming reservations within 24 hours of them being booked. Payfully deposits directly into your bank account with funds usually available the same day. It works with all the major platforms, Airbnb, VRBO, HomeAway, and others, and they've helped thousands of hosts expand their business or cover unexpected expenses. Visit payfully.co, that's payfully.co, for $20 off your first request with code Newbery. That's payfully.co, promo code Newbery, Newbery.
Hello, welcome to the Newbery Report, the one and only podcast that every 2 weeks discusses a book that won the Newbery Medal. Today, the 1972 winner, Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of NIMH by Robert C. O'Brien. And Carolyn, you want to give us a quick plot synopsis?
I would love to. It's impossible to be quick, though. A lot of stuff happens in this book. So the novel revolves around Mrs. Frisby and her family. So her son Timothy, their daughter's name? I'm just gonna
Claudia or something.
No one cares about the daughter.
There's four kids, three kids.
Martin, Timothy, and the girl.
I thought there were two girls.
Oh God,
Claudia and another one.
There's
right?
no one named Claudia. I'm looking this up. No, we're never gonna get through this book.
We have this. We totally got this. Once we get the kids' names, it's all downhill.
Teresa, Martin, Cynthia. Oh, you're right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Claudia, Cynthia, they're all the same.
Okay.
Basic mice.
Okay. So this book is about Mrs. Frisby and her children, who one of which, Timothy, one day suddenly falls ill. And she has to travel to go see an old wise mouse, Mr. Ages, who gives her some medicine. She returns home. She gives him the medicine. Turns out that Timothy has pneumonia, which unfortunately, due to the changing in weather and the nature of them having to move to a safer, secure location off of the fields that are about to be plowed, they need to be able to leave, but Timothy will not be well enough to do it. So Mrs. Frisby sort of starts on this quest, trying to figure out a way in which she can save her family from being plowed, but also save Timothy from not falling victim to the cold spring air, incuring?
It's not a word.
The cold spring air worsening his pneumonia to the point of possible death. So through a series of events, she finds herself knocking on the rose bush of the Rats of NIMH, where she finds that there's a group of hyper-intelligent rats that when they tell them their life story, turns out they have been scientifically injected with some sort of serum that made them super intelligent, able to read, form their own society, and just generally be badass friggin' rats. So the rats eventually help Mrs. Frisby. She finds out actually that her widowed husband, is that the right term?
Nope.
Yep. That her widowed husband.
She's widowed. Her deceased husband or late husband,
Jonathan, was actually also in the same experiment. Though he was a mouse, he was one of the few mice to escape. I'm not prepared for this. It's a long book.
He wasn't a rat of NIMH. He was a mouse of NIMH.
Yes, that is an accurate fact about this book.
I'm not here to deny facts.
So because
Wrong. Sorry.
So, in order to stay true to Jonathan's memory, they agree to help Mrs. Frisby, and they end up moving her house. Everything is successful. There's a lot of craziness and hijinks along the way, but overall, the house is moved. Timothy stays alive, and the Rats of NIMH go off to form their own society deep off in the woods.
That was great. We won't change that later.
Nope, definitely not. You should keep the whole thing, the whole rambling thing.
Great. So I guess let's just start off with first impressions. Carolyn, did you like it?
Kerry,
I set you up.
I love this book. So this is the first time on this podcast that we are reading a book that I not only read as a child, but loved as a child. This book was my jam. I'm looking at it right now, and literally every single page is turned down.
I was just about to say, the point of dog-earing pages is to isolate them from the other non-dog-eared pages. But you've dog-eared every other page.
It's probably seriously about 50% of the pages have been dog-eared, in which about 50% of the text has been highlighted by me. I feel very strongly about this book. I mean, I do have the nostalgic factor to it, but I will admit one thing, and this is slightly embarrassing for myself. I have a notoriously poor memory, and I knew going into reading this book that it was one of my favorite books as a child, but that is all that I remembered about it. So I kind of kept thinking that as I read, it would come back to me, and I found that the opposite was true. Like, I was constantly surprised by the things that came out, but at the same time, felt very true to form. I was like, yeah, young Carolyn would love this too.
So nothing popped out to you as you read it that reminded you like, oh, this is why I love this book?
Very little. Well, nothing popped out. Not this is why I loved it. Nothing popped out where I was like, oh yeah, now I remember dragging the cat. Or, oh yeah, now I remember. Like, I didn't have as many of those epiphany moments as I thought I would. But I love this book.
Do you want to isolate a couple of moments that you did like, at least in this reading?
Oh my gosh, it's all of them. And the wonderful little, I can't even form sentences. There are all these little like bombs that happen in the text that are so gorgeous. Like this page, they're talking to Mrs. Frisby, the rats, about the hard task they have where whenever they need to be able to move in the open, they need to drug the farm cat because the cat is the main enemy and the cat is the thing that's going to come up and murder them if they don't drug him into a stupor. And it's the end of a chapter and it says, you should know, they're trying to get Mrs. Frisby, they're trying to explain to her the actual danger because she's volunteered to put the sleeping powder into the food. And they said, you should know that the danger is great. It was in that same kitchen yesterday, running from Dragon's Bowl, that Mr. Ages got his leg broken. And it was in doing that same thing. Oh my God, I'm literally getting chills as I read this. And it was in doing that same thing last year that your husband died.
That's not funny.
It's not funny, but my note in it is a little emoji of like the face.
I didn't think you could do an emoji with a pen, but you did it.
But I did. And that's the end of the chapter, of course. I just found it so fascinating. And I think that the way that the book starts is not how it ends up.
I agree.
I made note of this, that it was page 68 was the very first time we got to the rats. And this book is only 200 some odd pages. And we really don't even find out much about the rats until shortly after that. So there's this whole first section of the book that just directly deals with Mrs. Frisby. And it's almost like there are these red herrings. She meets the crow, Jeremy. Yes, she meets the crow, Jeremy, and you think that they're going to go off and have their separate adventure. They have this little like thorn in the lion's pad kind of relationship going on. Is that an illusion people know?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
It's an Aesop fable.
And then, she goes to visit the owl and Mr. Ages and there's all these little things. And Mr. Ages is the only one that really kind of ends up paying off in the end. But like, I just thought, I don't know. I thought it was really wonderful storytelling. Tell me how you feel about this book, Kerry.
I didn't like it. We all knew that was coming, right? We all knew that was coming. I didn't like the message that was coming across because we sort of pitted people against animals in a weird way. And people kidnapped rats. They did these tests on them. They gave them too much knowledge and then they virtually punished them for obtaining the knowledge, right? By keeping them captive, teaching them captivity, and then keeping them captive. And we don't like the Fitzgibbons, and the cat, which is domesticated by the people, is our enemy. But the goal of the rats seems to be to recreate almost to a detail the way that people work. They're creating their own civilization, and it sort of gives this idea that the way that people work is the best way. And I think this is going to sound ridiculous. It undermines animal intelligence because it sort of doesn't endow the way that animals live with a validity in the way that it endows the way people live. It says the way what people do is civilized, like literally civilized, in a way that undercuts the way that animals interact. And I think that's a less interesting choice, because all we're seeing, it becomes Animal Farm. It becomes they're going to incur the vices of humanity at the same time.
But don't you think that it's interesting that the protagonists that they chose to sort of take on this like human experience are rats, which they say multiple times that the reason that they're trying to put themselves forth as a society and sort of model themselves off of like the human society that they have learned from is because that they as a species steal to eat. I mean, like, I don't know if it would have been the same book if it was a pack of wolves that suddenly got hyper intelligent. Would they just continue being hunters, or would then they learn the empathy for other creatures and learn that, you know, eating meat is bad? Is that something that would happen? What if it was a group of deer who were just herbivores? Would they take no lessons away whatsoever? You know, the thing that they really sort of beat you over the head with is that the rats don't want to steal anymore, and they don't want to be dependent on someone else. And I think that that's perfectly valid.
It's hinting at a morality that feels absent of the circle of life, and sort of, it says stealing is bad in a world where for animals, animals don't have a morality. Like they don't.
Ooh, I'll fight you on that.
I don't mean it. I think being amoral means you live outside the realm of morality, which means you're not beholden to it. Mm-hmm. And I think to give our sense of morality to these animals, like it doesn't interest me as much as one that might have naturally evolved from the way that they live their lives. Mm. Like, for example, we talk about, and I never looked this up, so we're just going to live within the reality of the book. We're not going to compare it to the real world. So let's make that assumption up top. They talk about how initially rats were one of the foremost evolving species, but they became so complacent because they figured out how to live in a civilization that they didn't need to keep protecting themselves and evolving and getting smarter. So they ended up as prairie dogs. Mm-hmm. And for a moment, we sort of compared, what if they had kept going? And monkeys did. Monkeys became people. What if rats had gotten to what we're considering our point in evolution? I won't say where along the spectrum of evolution we are, but got to the point where we, as people that are writing and reading books, are. Which, P.S., I love that moment where they're like, and no rats wrote any books. I'll write my memoir if someday rats write books. It was a wonderful moment. But it felt so infused by what humans are and how humans work that I was like so interested in how rats perceive the world, independent of humanity, because these rats did sort of live independently of people. They lived on the fringes of a farmer's market. And I thought that, I don't know, it just felt reductive to me because I was curious, like, what if rats had binary. What if rats had continued to evolve in a way that they could more acutely dominate their surroundings than they do now? And I was curious about that, and it just, like, we just steered it towards people. And I was like,
well, spoiler alert, listeners, the book is written by a human, not a rat. I think that naturally that's going to happen. Naturally, people are going to skew, and they're going to create their own perceptions based on their own realities. And that's, you
haven't read Watership Down. It's like, I know it's about bunnies.
No, you can't.
It's bunnies. It's not rats. But I think he had an opportunity to rebuild a society from the ground up. I mean, it's sort of similar to like Lord of the Rings or Ender's Game. When you Ender's Game is America just in a future post-Cold War. So he had an opportunity to build a whole new world, and I felt like he just relied too heavily on our world. Like, so many of the illusions that the characters make are to people things.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, can I tell you one of my favorites? Is when they learn about the rat race. Did you write this too?
That was a nice moment, though.
So they're quoting the rat race, like the stereotype, the quote, rat race. He says, which I learned means a race where no matter how fast you run, you don't get anywhere. But there was nothing in the book about rats. And I felt bad about the title because I thought it wasn't a rat race at all. It was a people race. And no sensible rats would ever do something so foolish.
Which I wanted more of that. I wanted more of what a rat would have done. And I felt like at every step, we sort of did what people did.
It's true, but you can make the argument that the reason that humans have made so many advances over the years is our acquisition and utilization of language. Language is the reason that we're so smart. It's the reason that we are able to pass down things. It's the reason we're able to teach and learn and write and all of that stuff. That really was the basis of the intelligence of the rats. There's no barometer for their intelligence written in this book other than language, that they taught them how to read, and then because they learned how to read, they could figure stuff out from then.
Right, and increase their memory.
Exactly. So the idea being, okay, if they've learned to read, are they going to follow the same trajectory? Does reading eventually sort of pigeonhole you into this sort of future? And I don't think that that's necessarily true, but I think it's an interesting thought experiment.
I guess in a world where now I'm stepping outside the book, have Animal Farm, where we see animals evolve into falling into the same vices of people, I was yearning for something that felt more different. And I thought, I'm going to call it lazy. I'm going to do it. I'm using the L word.
No.
Because the illusions that we could apologize for the book and say, they learned all of their idioms from the books that they read, which would be human touch points. Mm-hmm. Although they sound weird in a rat's mouth. Like when he's talking about in the cages and they would, they basically played telephone when they were in the cages, right? And so when the rats had been captured and they were put in their individual cages in NIMH, which is what? The National Institute for Mental Health. Which they never say in this book.
They do not, no.
I guess that's why I thought there was maybe there are 2 movies? I don't know. He says Nicodemus, who's our sort of most narrative rat. You have different degrees of narration amongst the rats. Our most narrative rat describes it as this game of telephone as like passing notes in school, which as rats have never been in school nor passed notes, it feels like a weird analogy to draw. And similarly, when they end up in the library of the honeymooning couple who apparently announced their 8-month honeymoon in a newspaper.
By the way, Thieves of America will be out of our house for 8 months.
And we're going to leave a copy of this newspaper on the desk for when we get back. Nicodemus again describes the library with a human reference. He says it was one of those libraries with the small ladders on wheels, which I doubt both that Nicodemus has seen a library before this one, and 2, that any of the pictures that they showed him in NIMH had libraries with little ladders on wheels. Or if they did, they didn't likely have other libraries without ladders on wheels to juxtapose to this library that he's in now. I just felt like there were so many opportunities to reinvent the wheel. Like you have a manner to communicate successfully, you have a memory to retain that communication, and you have a population that can read, communicate, and remember what you're talking about. And then you have the entire history of humanity, or whatever this couple had in their library with their ladder with the small wheels, to dig into the way that you wanted to create your world. And it just seemed like we didn't blank slate it enough, or we didn't build off of animals enough. We didn't build off the way that rats, we didn't get a strong sense of how they operated before and how what they learned influenced. And my sort of like check and mate point about why I think this is lazy, I'm sorry for this in advance, Carolyn, is exactly what you're talking about language. The rats from jump speak English. They understand it. They don't speak it, but they understand it. And a world that evolves in that way, where the animals understand what people are saying, but don't either exercise or possess the ability to communicate back, I think is kind of lazy and kind of an easy way of navigating that problem of like, oh, do we understand people or not? And they speak English. Oh, one more thing that I just wanted to note is that like Also, they maintained this like chivalrous / condescension towards women that people had, that I was like, ugh, I thought maybe if we started from scratch, we wouldn't retain that. But they still relay that to her when she offers to go put the sleeping potion in the food.
They do. They say it's no job for a woman.
For a lady.
And then immediately in the next line, negate that.
But if it surprises me that their urgency as rats or as animals would be to protect the female in order for breeding. But that's not what a lady does. You know, like there's something in particular that suggests a devotion to chivalry that borders on condescension when you say lady as opposed to female or woman or whatever word one denotes female ratness or mouseness with. That I was like, that feels like a missed opportunity. Like where, because she fights that, not in the way that's like, what are you talking about? Like, oh, maybe they sort of garnered chauvinism from their books, right? Like willing to buy that. But she wouldn't have, you know, and she buys into that as if it's a normal thing because she doesn't proffer her legs right away, right? So there was another moment where I was like, oh, it was written by a male writer, so maybe that's why. Anyway, I feel like I'm just belaboring this point.
So then I guess my question to you is that for just as an experiment, let's forget the backstory of the rats. So that's something it's a good chunk of the novel. But as far as just like the linear story of Mrs. Frisby and her going through the woods and meeting the crow and meeting the owl and having this experience, I mean, what did you think about that?
Fine. It was fine. No, it was good. It was good. I think I just wanted a little bit more world building. I mean, I bought it, right? Like I understood what happened. I felt compelled by the journey. I'm definitely Team Justin. You know, like I'm in it to win it with this book. But I didn't think that it exercised the full length of creativity that it could have.
But in another vein, I appreciated that some things were left vague. Because I see what you're trying to say, that there wasn't a lot of world building happening, but at the same time, like I think it could have been very easy to be like, and now we're going to put little perfect bows on every facet of the conversation in this book. And there are so many questions at the end, even just in the last sort of act of the story, you know, with all of this information coming out about like the rats that were found electrocuted in the store, who were not sure if they were the deserters. And then the two rats that ended up passing in the, I know.
So sad.
Did you not shed a tear?
No, but I felt.
Okay, I shed a tear. I shed multiple tears for the rats that passed away in the extermination versus it's never fully said. It's just implied that the people that have come are the people from NIMH. And I'm like, what an interesting idea would it be if it was just a bunch of regular old exterminators just concerned about rabies, you know? And,
True.
And then the question of like, do the rats make it there? Does their civilization exist? You know, one of the last lines of the book is Martin, one of the sons, saying, I'm going to go and I'm going to see the rats one day. And I was like, never in my life have I been set up for a sequel more in my entire life. And this doesn't happen. We never get to find out any more information about all of these questions that are left. And I can read that as world building personally.
Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this. Hello, listeners. Are you a business owner? Your next customer might be listening right now, just like you are. You can let them know who you are by sponsoring this show. Just email us at hello@citizenracecar.com. That's HELLO@citizenracecar.com.
Racecar Radio is proud to support the work of Aya Worldwide, a tenacious and dedicated organization working to address the root causes of poverty in West Africa. Because they believe that who a person is and where they come from should not solely determine what they are able to achieve. To learn about their work and how you can support it, please visit ayaworldwide.org.
All right, let's get back to Miss Frisby.
So I'm a very big and active animal rights activist. And I think that I really responded to the way that the lab rats are portrayed in this novel. And I think that it's done in such a wonderful way that just really sort of gets at the heart of what it means to be a lab rat. You know, it's one of the few times you really are sort of getting like the lab rat's perspective in these sort of situations. So at one point, Nicodemus is talking about being there, and he says, "Worse was the dreadful feeling. I know we all had it, that we were completely at the mercy of someone we knew not at all, for some purpose we could not guess. As it turned out, the uncertainty itself was the worst suffering we had to undergo." And, you know, like, we didn't know. There's all of these lines I've underlined of just this horrible feeling of being at the mercy of someone else that I think is really interesting and is not something that you typically see in a novel, especially one for children.
Oppression?
Oppression. No, but directly about animals.
There were a lot of moments I did like. I'm saying, look, you're going to cry. And I just want to tell you that but I did really enjoy, we have these mazes, right? Like, that's what we think of when we think of lab rats, like electrocution, food, maze, right? Like, awesome. And then to the way that they get out is its own maze, is its own, they get out through the air ducts, through the central air system, and they directly apply the maze skills that they used. Well, almost directly, because it's dark, so they bring a string, but they sort of correlatively apply their maze navigating skills to getting out of NIMH.
What a heartbreaking scene, too.
When the mice get blown away.
They literally, I can't. It's hard for me to find quotes because I've dog-eared every page of this book. So the mice get swept away, and then Jonathan and Mr. Ages say, you know, like, we have to go back for them. And immediately the ratsers say this would be useless and foolish. And there would be 8 lost instead of 6 if you go to look for them. And I wrote it, and I took a moment to pause and just be like, what a horrible thing to say. Like, what a wonderful, logical thing to say, but what a horrible thing, you know, to tell someone not to go back for their friends. And then 3 sentences later, they say that Justin takes the thread and he spends half the night going through every single vent he can find. And we see that again and again. These rats, they say, you know, like, oh, we're going to have this opinion, and then immediately negate it and go towards like the more empathetic or the more, I just think, or these more like humane ways of doing things. And I think it's beautiful. I think it's really beautiful that the way that they've set up their society, chauvinism and all.
Yeah, there are a lot of things about them that I do like. It's only the minor, lazier like moments where I thought there were opportunities to just expand the world and the logic of rats, because I think that's a key illustration of using animal logic. Animals are going to do what's best to continue the species, and I think I wanted more of those up top, of like, this is my animal reaction and this is the way I'm navigating it in a language world, like in a way in which I'm able to articulate instincts. Because if we sort of think about how we at least believe we understand animals interact, it's based on instinct and, you know, protection of themselves and their families. So if you give that words, what does that look like? And I think that was more interesting. Those moments were the most interesting. But I do want to address Jonathan. He's sort of this like shadow over the book, and the impetus for each character, for the owl, for the rats, to rally behind Mrs. Frisby and to move her cinder block from one side of the rock to the other side of the rock with pulleys. Do you buy the explanation of why he never told her, or would you be mad?
No, I think it's pretty flimsy.
I agree.
So the reason that he never told her that he was a super smart, immortal mouse was that it would have been too hard for him, because it would have had to because then he would have had to admit to her that he will live and she will die. And that's it. Like, they've been married for quite some time. They've had children together, and he never once thinks to bring it up. But I gotta say, as far as the laziness goes, we never really discussed the fact that Mrs. Frisby who is just a regular old field mouse, never realizes that, like, her new husband, who's teaching her how to read and how electricity works and all of that, is not something abnormal that should be, like, pondered about.
Yeah, if I wanted to see anything else, it would be the courtship of Mr. and Mrs. Frisby. Like, let's write that
great book.
I think you should write some fan fiction.
But yes, it's not the best excuse in the book.
Yeah. And I, as someone that's like particularly furious about secret lives for the protection of the person that you're keeping the secret from, I think if it's not the most condescending choice, it's flat out mean.
Yeah. She takes it all very smoothly. We really don't get any backlash from Mrs. Frisby, which is surprising. Not once does she even pause to say, hey, this all is weird. Let's take a moment to think about all of this. But to be fair, it all happens in very quick succession.
Yeah, and she's sort of preoccupied with Timothy, who we seem to get this impression that he's been endowed with the same patience and kindness. And I mean, I'm on the fence about whether to compliment Timothy too much is receiving too many of Jonathan's traits, because I don't agree with his choice not to tell his wife or his family about this life that he led before he came into their lives and before they existed. Mm-hmm. So now we get to the great illusion of life, in which the book tells us, through some metaphor or other literary device, a lens through which we can perceive the world. Mm-hmm. Carolyn, would you like to favor us with your illusion?
So I chose maybe an unpopular one for my illusion of life.
Unpopular in this room?
In this room, 2 people. No, but like I said, we don't even meet the rats till a good portion of the way through the book, and then there's a lot of sort of talk. But when it really came down to it, I chose an illusion of life from the very beginning, and it was something that I really responded to. And it's I'm going to quote now: "We all help one another against the cat." And I just, it's something that's repeated once or twice at the beginning. And at the beginning of the book, it's a literal fact. It is the other forest creatures, whether it's Jeremy the crow that she saves from the dragon, or whether it's the other field mice and all of that they have to survive against the cat. Like, it's a literal translation of that. But I don't know. I think if you really wanted to associate it with the rest of this world, like, we're all helping each other. That's the idea, is like the cat is the evil of the world and we're just trying to avoid it, and we're all helping each other do that. And that's the whole reason that the rats are going off and they're creating their own society, is they don't want to live in the evils anymore of thievery and burglary. And I think it's just a really nice message to pass on. Just help each other out against, the less fun things in the world. But, what a character dragon, right? What a great villain.
He gets the short end of the character development stick.
I don't care. I love him. He just prowls all day long. Yeah. I also thought maybe of when Justin is speaking to Mrs. Frisby and he says, why live without stealing, of course. That's the whole idea. That's the plan. That might be a little too nail on the head, but it's definitely a big theme in the novel.
And before we wrap up, we need to score this book. We need to give it a grade. So, Carolyn, you want to go first and give it a grade?
Of course I do. I'll give it 5 shiny pieces of tinsel.
I was going to give it shiny things.
No! 5 out of 5. This book is amazing. If you haven't read it yet, go out immediately and buy it. Do not listen to Kerry. She doesn't know what she's talking about.
I'm not trying to ruin
She's
sales.
Ruining it.
I'm going to give it one long honeymoon.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Carolyn Burns, for joining me today.
Thank you so much, Kerry Caston. Oh my God.
No more pesto before these recording sessions for you.
Wine. It's Caston.
It is. We've met.
Thank you so much, Carrie Caston.
Thank you so much. And if you want to get ahead and read our book for 2 weeks, you have 2 weeks to do it. It is a 1973 Newbery Award winner, Julie of the Wolves by Jean Craighead George.
Oh!
Bye! Thank you so much for listening. Join the conversation and tell us what you thought about the book at facebook.com/Newbery Report. That's NEWBERY Report. The Newbery Report is hosted and recorded by me, Carrie Caston, and my co-host is Carolyn Burns. It was co-produced and edited by David Hoffman. It's a production of Race Car Radio. If you're not already subscribed to our show, you can do so on iTunes or Google Play, or head to www.racecarradio.com.
Race Car Radio is a division of Citizen Race Car. We tell stories.